Invocation by Mr. Sabula and the Pledge of Allegiance by Dr. Trampy.
Dear God and Heavenly Father, I beseech you today for your assistance in guiding this board to make decisions solely motivated by the love for Spotsylvania County and improvement of our quality of life. As elected officials, we seem too often to forget it's our duty to work together in harmony and furtherance of our county's future. Please instill in us a sense of cooperation that will guide us towards fulfilling this goal. I would also request that you bless and watch over our citizen participants during this process. I forward this prayer request in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vice Chairman, Chairman Ross is not with us this evening. Mr. Benton and members of the board, there is one item in the bullpen for addition to the consent agenda in connection with your adoption of this meeting's agenda. That is the appointment of John M. Davis to the FAMPO Citizens Transportation Advisory Group. And I understand that a resume has been circulated. That is the only change, and with that change, I'd ask your approval of the agenda.
A second? Or let's call it a question. Did I make it? On.
6 yes, with Mr. Ross not present.
Thank you, board members. That brings us to the approval of your consent agenda. May I have the floor computer, please? Consent agenda is as follows. First is approval of the board meeting minutes from May 23rd, 2017. Next is acceptance of a Bridges Grant Program Award for the July 1, 2017 to June 30, 2018 period. This is with for the Department of Social Services in the amount of $177,100. There is no local match. Third is approval of contract modifications for renewal of a contract with Galls LLC. This is for sheriff's uniforms. This is the fourth and final year of a 4-year contract. Next is approval of contract with Eastern Corporation for Salem Church Library partial roof replacement. This is a repair to the connection between the original roof and the roof of the addition. This is a low bid of $266,661. Next is approval of contract to Rising Sun, Inc. to provide construction services for Holbert Building Sanitary, Sewer, and Waterline improvements. This is a low bid of $339,859. It was the lowest of 9, as I recall, and less than half of the high bids. There was plenty of competition for that one. Next is approval of a contract with Southern Paving. This is to provide parking lot improvements at Company 2 down at Livingston Fire and Rescue Stations. Low bid of $142,123.17. Next is approval of a contract with Virginia Builders for the Marshall Park Convenience Center site improvements. This is a low bid of $593,456. This improvement will transform the Marshall Park Convenience Center site from a green box site to a grade separated disposal site. Will improve traffic flow and reduce our operating costs considerably at that site where we've had dramatically increasing volumes of customers. Next is approval of purchase order to Computer Aid, Inc. This is for Information services, staffing augmentation services. This is to provide continuing service to support our maintenance of our AS400 system. It's a contract not to exceed $200,000. Next is approval of a purchase order to Securus Technologies for annual software maintenance for our CAD system. That's at a rate of $286,966. Next is appointment of Ms. Reese Lesko as an alternate member of the Citizens Budget Review Committee for a term that expires December 31st, 2019. Item 11 is appointment of David A. Troyer as an alternate member to the CBRC for a term that also expires December 31, 2019. Item 12 is appointment of Mr. Troyer also to the Transportation Committee for a term expiring June 15 of 2018. Item 13 is authorization for A. Smith Bowman Company to act as our authorized agent for a partnership grant under the FY18 Virginia Tourism Commission Marketing Leverage Grant. This is a $25,000 grant coming from the Commonwealth that'll be matched by $49,500 provided by A. Smith Bowman, $250 provided by the Grapes and Grains Consortium, and $250 provided and matched by the county. Item 14 is approval of contract renewal to Revere Gas Incorporated. This is for delivered propane that we use for heating. This is at a resulting price effective of just over 94 cents a gallon. That's in comparison to the typical market price of over $2 a gallon for delivered propane for heating. So that's a very good contract for our taxpayers. 15 is a budget adjustment appropriation for FY18 congestion mitigation of air quality incentive, the CMAQ program funding. This is a state program that with some it's state and a little bit of federal money that provides for conversion of sheriff's vehicles to propane, as we're estimating a $31,700 reimbursement for the conversion of 5 vehicles. There is no local match. Item 16 is a budget and appropriation adjustment. This is for additional federal E-rate technology grant funds that are coming through us to go to our school division. The schools are getting a bit more than anticipated, particularly $157,590 more than anticipated. There is no local match for that. Next, we have item 17, Lees Park Pod E, section 1G and 1H subdivision street acceptances into the Virginia State Secondary System. Item 18 is a Lees Park Pod E, section 2C, 2D, and 2A, or part of 2A. This is also subdivision street acceptances into the state secondary system. Item 19 is the Estates at Lees Park, section 2, subdivision street acceptances into the Virginia State Secondary System. And finally, the added item, the appointment of Mr. John M. Davis to the FAMPO Citizens Transportation Advisory Group. And that is your consent agenda.
Anybody wishing to remove any of these items? A motion to approve. Call to question?
Six yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is public presentations. Amy, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, sir.
So bear with me a moment, board members. I have Michelle is bringing me the guidelines to run through because I left my sheet upstairs. Thank you, Michelle. Guidelines for public presentations are as follows. Public presentations are an opportunity for citizens to present matters that you believe deserve the board's attention. These presentations are not part of a public hearing. Sign up to speak at each public hearing is separate. Public presentations are one-way comments from citizens to the Board of Supervisors. This is not a forum for dialogue or debate. To make a public presentation, please sign up on the sign-up sheet provided and please print clearly for our records. Come to the lectern when Amy calls your name. Clearly state your name, address, and voting district for our record. Address your comments directly to the board. State whether you're speaking on your own behalf, in which case you'll have 3 minutes, or speaking on behalf of a recognized group, in which case you'll have 5 minutes. Public presentations shall not be used to address matters subject to public hearings or to make political campaign speeches, private advertisements, or personal attacks. Your written comments are always welcome, and please note the light system on the podium. Green is go, yellow for 30 seconds is you're running out of time, and red means you're expected to stop speaking. Thank you, Amy, who has signed up.
The first citizen signed up to speak is Larry Plating, followed by Justin Langridge.
My name is Larry Plating. I'm a retired water chemist living in the county district that gives Mr. Ross his seat at your table, Cortland District. As I picked up my research notes on fluoride today, I was made aware that by the great oracle Google that this week is Fluoride Awareness Week. How providential can that be? Earlier this week, I sent a PDF on fluoride awareness to the BOS, hoping some would give it a read. Quickly, the 10 points it makes is: most developed countries do not fluoridate their water. 2, fluoridated countries do not have less cavities. 3, fluoride adversely affects many tissues in the body besides the teeth, especially IQ. And I'm losing mine. Fluoridation is not a natural process. 40% of American teenagers show overexposure to fluoride. For infants, fluoride provides no benefit, only risks. Fluoride supplements have never been approved by the FDA. Fluoride is the only medicine added to public water. Swallowing fluoride provides little benefit to the teeth. Disadvantaged communities are the most disadvantaged by fluoride. I have talked to Mr. Ed Petrovich regarding why fluoride is added to the water. As far as he can determine, it's because we've always done it that way. I ask you, is that a good reason? Ponder it. Ed said there's no law requiring it to be added to the water. It provides no water sterilizing benefit like chlorine does. For those of you who are appointed to the CBRC, I suggest you look at this line item when it comes up for your review, because it's not necessary. Based on current and growing knowledge about fluoride, perhaps it is high time we turned off the fluoride spigot at the water company and saved the county some money at the same time. You'll be saving taxpayers who are trying to get this pesky substance out of their water also, like me, hundreds of dollars per year in bottled water and supplies for reverse osmosis systems. People in Spotsylvania are not ignorant of the positive benefits of applying fluoride to the surface of the teeth during certain age groups, and presently do purchase it at no added cost with their toothpaste. That is part of the reason for the fact 5 that people are over-fluoridating. In conclusion, let the fluoride be provided by the people's choice, not government coercion, and save us all taxpayer dollars in the process. Thank you very much.
Justin Langridge.
I'm going to have to go home and read more on fluoride, but I will say 32 years of county water, no cavities. Good evening, members of the board. Justin Langridge representing the Spotsylvania Career Firefighters Association. Our office is located at 9835 Courthouse Road. We want to say thank you tonight while also addressing the compensation issues that have been a concern for several years now. Thank you for taking steps to formally address the compensation packages through the outsourced compensation study, which was completed late 2016, and with a final report published in January of this year. Much of the data presented in the report confirmed what we already knew anecdotally, that our members are not being compensated competitively with the market. Of the benchmark positions surveyed, fire and rescue was clearly the furthest off market, 25 to 50% below market midpoint in benchmark positions, and this is severely undercompensated for their work. When the report was presented, we had early concerns. Several key issues that we had hoped would be addressed in the study seemed to have been overlooked, and the total cost to implement as it was presented seemed incredibly low at only $1.8 million. That's in line with past year compensation budgeting, so how could it possibly address the positions that are underpaid by tens of thousands of dollars? But that's what they told you, and you all asked, does this fix our compression issue? They said yes. New salary scales, new midpoint ranges, no more compression. We raised our questions and concerns both formally and quietly with members of the board, with FREM admin, and with the county's director of HR. The answers to what we thought were easy questions were somewhat hard to get. Had our questions not already been thought of? Did the study lack thoroughness? Despite our concerns, we put faith in the system and have been hopeful for the last 6 months that the county would address these issues, and understanding that fiscal constraints exist and knowing that it may not be fixed in a single year. As we look at this today, I don't mean to sound harsh, but the process has been just somewhat of a disappointment. The report was presented in January, you approved a budget in April, but staff is still just now meeting with directors to review compensation implementation today. Why hasn't there been a more thorough drafted plan? After all, the CEO stood here and confidently told you that $1.8 million fixes everything, that you could even spread that out over a couple of years. As it's been explained to me, we're still working to stretch the $1.8 million as far as it'll go this year, and we may only be scratching the surface, so to speak. Having a defined plan or a commitment for the future would require $3 million, roughly $3 million, to bring my members to market midpoint and to pay them what they feel they're worth. It's not my math, that's simply taking Evergreen's own data numbers and plugging them in. Evergreen's job should have been to provide you all with a valid situation assessment, not to provide you with a cost they thought you could pallet. Evergreen's $1.8 million proposal does not fix everything. It doesn't even fix the compression as they told you it would. In fact, it would make it worse in some cases. By their proposal, a 15-year firefighter would make more money than a 15-year employee with 13 years as a firefighter and 2 as a lieutenant. Is that because the process wasn't thorough? Have we overly simplified a solution to a complex problem? Implementing another small, modest adjustment does not address the issues or concerns that we've raised. My members don't expect 40% raises or Fairfax salaries, but they do expect to be compensated a fair and competitive wage. They do expect salaries comparable to Stafford. You've bought a lot of stuff that's very good for the citizens, but also stuff that's only as capable as the people using it. My members are proud of their department, they're proud of our system and the service that it provides, but brand new trucks in every station doesn't put diapers on little Johnny. When my members came to work for you, they were shown a salary range, but now they see no way to the other end of that scale. I've talked with some of you about the fact that it's difficult for firefighters to change departments late in their career, but now new members see senior members making not much more and are asking if they should stay or should they go. One of the commitments that we've brought to you, there's a lot of firefighters, one of the comments that you all have made is that you've bought a lot of firefighters, but you're somewhat only renting them right now. Was I given 3 or 5? All right, I'll wrap up. I ask you this, please consider providing any additional funding to solve the problems we know exist and implement those funds with fidelity. Please consider a more urgent solution to bring public safety salaries in line with the market. Our members are here tonight to show support, but please know that they're also frustrated, and we would love to hear firm support and a clear plan of commitment tonight. Please give us that commitment and some direction going forward. Thank you for the extra time.
There are no other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody that did not sign up that would wish to now? All right.
Hope you gentlemen are doing well tonight. My name's Tim Brenner. You all met me in some other capacities. I'm a first sergeant over the traffic services unit with the sheriff's office. But tonight I'm speaking to you on behalf of myself and the Spotsylvania chapter of the Police Benevolent Association. Mr. Landridge was a little more ready tonight. I was debating whether I should have a speech or not. I sort of wanted to see what the updated implementation plan was before I really spoke on it. However, I've got a few kids in tow tonight, and I don't know if I can keep them here for 2 hours. So I decided I'd say what I do know. First off, I do appreciate what you all have done for the sheriff's office this year in terms of staffing. I think it's a great start for us. The county's been growing, and the approval of the positions that you gave us this year was the most full-time positions I can ever remember being given by the board to the sheriff's office since I started here in July of 2000. So we do appreciate things. We don't want you to think we're always complaining about stuff. However, as Mr. Landridge so eloquently put before I got up here, while Evergreen's proposals to decompress within classification is great if you've stayed a deputy your whole career here, but people that have also taken the initiative to promote and change classifications are actually getting sort of the short end of the stick. And I forwarded something that I believe I've heard you all have gotten up at your level that sort of was a scenario that I put in place, what it would mean for me had I been a deputy to 17 years with the county, then getting decompressed within classification, and then promoting one rank up, and me following what I have done, which is patrol, detective, sergeant over schools, sergeant on patrol, first sergeant on midnights, first sergeant in days, first sergeant over traffic, managing over $100,000 a year in grants. I would only be making, as a new sergeant, if I stayed a deputy from July of 2000 to August of this year, got decompressed, and then got promoted to sergeant, which is actually a pay grade below first sergeant, I would only be making about $100 a year less than as a first sergeant with this county of 7 years under what they have proposed. Now, I do understand, Mr. Taylor, you all have been working on sort of a plan to do that, and I'm going to stick around for that because I'm very eager to see what you all propose. All I am asking is this. I teach my kids loyalty, and I would hope that this county and this board and the administration understand that loyalty needs to be recognized, not only for those that have decided that they want to stay as a deputy or whatever level, but those that have also decided to take the initiative to promote up the ranks into supervision and management. Because ultimately what's going to end up happening is you all are going to have compression not within classification, but across classification, where you can have people that have been in new ranks that are very close to those that have been in those areas of responsibility for years. That's all I'm asking, that we not forget tenure counts, not only within rank, but even if you've promoted or changed classification. Thank you very much for your time tonight, Mr. Taylor. I look forward to seeing what you all are proposing.
Taylor?
See, that brings us to presentations by staff. First being the vote on R16-0004. This is Christine T. Neal and Rebecca T. Akers, the Thorburn Estates, and RO16-0004, Chancellor, it's in Chancellor District.
Thank you. I have a presentation if you would like me to present. Otherwise, the applicant at the May 23rd meeting proposed changes to the proffers to address staff's concerns with the construction deadline and the lack of guarantees for the payment schedule should the construction not be completed. Those revisions have addressed all of staff's concerns. Staff is recommending approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. McClung?
So a quick one. So from staff and from legal, we've addressed all our concerns?
Yeah, Alexander from our office has worked closely both with staff and with the applicants, and legal is fine with it.
The public hearing was closed, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then motion to approve.
Call to question?
Six yes.
Very good. That brings us, Mr. Chairman, to the Employee of the Year recognition. Rose Hayward is here.
Good afternoon. If I may, I'm going to do it a little bit out of order because it seems to me it makes sense to present the Employee of the Quarter recipients and then kind of pause with almost like a big drum roll in our heads and then talk about the Employee of the Year folks. So I'm going to ask that I'll give a brief synopsis of who they are and why they're receiving this recognition. And then I'm going to ask the recipients if they would come forward to receive their recognition from the board. So recipients for the Employee of the Quarter for general government was Tika Mann. Ms. Mann is an exemplary employee who takes pride and dignity in her position. She understands the importance not only of doing an exceptional job on a regular basis, but also how important the public perception is. When a citizen actually sees someone in a county uniform, how important it is for them to have confidence in the work that is done. This was actually demonstrated on her way to work. Several months ago, she actually had seen a man who had gotten into a pretty major accident, and the person's vehicle actually ended up in an embankment. Being kind of going above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, she was on her way to work. There was no expectation, certainly in her role as a plant operator, to pull over and do anything. But she took it upon herself to take the initiative to assist this gentleman who literally had been ejected from the vehicle. So he had sustained some pretty serious injuries. Through all of that, she remained calm, professional. She stayed with the gentleman until the paramedics came and actually took command of the situation. Our recipient for Public Safety Employee of the Quarter is Sharon Williams, who's a detective with the Sheriff's Office. Detective Williams is a great example and a model employee as well. She very consistently demonstrates a high level of work ethic and positive interactions with her fellow employees. She deals on numerous cases, many of which are of a very sensitive and complex nature, some of them dealing with missing persons. There's an ever-growing workload there, and yet she manages the chaos with positive energy and enthusiasm and with a commitment to do a great job. So that drum roll, Employee of the Year. Okay, Employee of the Year for Public Service goes to Scott Bain, who is a firefighter EMT in our Fire Rescue and Emergency Management Department. Along with doing a great job in his role as a firefighter, there was one particular instance that really brought attention to those who are on the nominating committee as well as our county administration. Back in March, Firefighter Bain actually reported to Indian Acres Resort following a call where a citizen was experiencing chest pains. As they arrived, what they found was a gentleman who was heavily dependent on a wheelchair to get around. This gentleman appeared to have fallen on sort of hard times and was there to utilize some of the shower facilities and things that were there. While he was doing that, he had some difficulties in the shower. Allowing the citizen to maintain their dignity and respect, Mr. Firefighter Bain, as well as another colleague, had taken upon themselves to dry him off, help him out, and ensure that he was able to not only have his physical needs tended to, but also, some other needs as well. And last but not least, our Employee of the Year nomination for general government goes to Christine Minter, who's our payroll administrator. Now, if you don't know what a payroll administrator is, that's the person that makes sure that all the county employees get paid properly. So needless to say, if she does not do her job well, and I say she meaning one of one, there's a lot of unhappy people at the county. And you know what? We all seem pretty happy. So that means she's doing her job exceptionally well. Christine doesn't hear a whole lot until something goes wrong. And that's rare, I think, for the most part, because she's quite responsive, goes above and beyond on a regular basis, and in particular, this year found additional challenges that were presented not only in the day-to-day expanding of job duties, but also anytime there's like a facility close, which usually HR and finance beg the county administration to think very seriously before they close the facility, because usually that results in a lot of changes that need to happen with timesheets and so forth. But on occasion, that's warranted, due to safety situations and that. And when that happens, that usually means that Christine is going to be working a lot of long hours to make sure that people are paid appropriately. And she does so without complaint and exceptionally well. In addition to that, she has been a key contributor to a countywide initiative to build in electronic timesheets. Now, I know you might be sitting there thinking, really? We used to actually do paper timesheets? You would be correct. Until Christine and a bunch of other people actually got together and came up with an RFP for electronic timesheets, and then also implemented a system, which now I think we're at like 80% rolled out to the county. So pretty soon here, every single employee in the county will be having their time managed electronically, and that's largely due to her efforts. We do have actually one employee of the quarter, and I really am doing this out of order, so I apologize. But I want to make sure that we don't have an oversight here. First Sergeant Ed Boyd actually was a recipient as well, and is being recognized because he also goes above and beyond the call of duty. He came upon a car wreck in the response of his duties, found a young woman with a small baby who actually needed car repairs, was unable to do so because, again, of hardship. First Sergeant Boyd responded and did what was expected of him as a law enforcement officer, and took it a step further to actually go out with his own money and buy and purchase things for this woman and their children. And so certainly, as a law enforcement person, he did the right thing. As a citizen of this county and someone who really cares about the citizenry, he went above and beyond the call of duty. And so with that, I would ask that you would congratulate and recognize our Employee of the Quarter and Employee of the Year recipients.
Now, Rose, with due respect to the evil HR lady, I'm not sure that your drum roll was properly placed. As the next item on the agenda is the long-awaited report on the total compensation study implementation, and while you and your cohorts are coming to the table for the presentation, I would like to address just a few points if I could. At least they started out as a few points. We'll see how we do. Because this report is a culmination of roughly a year-long process that dates back to Mr. Benton's request at a board meeting about a year ago that the staff look into county salaries and compensation, and the board certainly joined in that initiative. Periodic evaluation of our compensation in relation to the market is actually called for in the board-adopted compensation philosophy. But the economic downturn in 2008 played havoc with employment and effectively put the kibosh on compensation studies. As noted last year, it's been more than 10 years since the county has done a compensation study, compensation market study. In light of our gradual and mercifully persistent economic recovery, we're in a position to consider once again where we stand in the market. Prior to any study, we knew from experience that we had started to see troublesome attrition in some positions and in some departments, in some particular jobs. We had also knew from experience that we had found it challenging to attract needed talent in some jobs with specialized skill sets, apparently, at least in part, due to pay. Taking these factors together, it became clear that it was time for a comprehensive review of county compensation. So we proceeded in accordance with the compensation philosophy and studied our compensation in comparison to market on a comprehensive basis. The Evergreen study called for considerable staff cooperation and effort because the methodology that Rose will explain in her presentation investigated our workforce to understand our positions and their classifications. In the FY18 budget, the board set aside a sum equal to 2.8% increase in our payroll to address implementation of the Evergreen study results. Near the end of the budget, the board was able to add about $285,000 or $287,000 to those set-aside funds, giving us about $2.1 million, or roughly 3.2% overall of a payroll increase to work with. Now, given the history we've had of salary compression, turnover, and hiring or talent attraction challenges, and the limitations of available funding and other parameters that we anticipated from the beginning, we said from the beginning that the implementation of the study results should take 2 or 3 years. We never expected this to be instant or a 1 year, solved in 1 year. And that is all still true. The change that we are recommending and the course that we recommended be set is a course in a new direction. It won't solve the whole set of problems in 1 year, but is a beginning in the right direction. And what we've realized is that compensation philosophy really is an art and not a science. There's no single best or single right way to do this. Looking back at how we got to this point, along with the economic downturn in 2008, we've also been operating in an organizational culture that has always defined, or for very long, for at least 20 years, has defined fairness as everybody gets the same thing. And that definition of fairness assigned very little, or frankly no value, to seniority or longevity in the organization. It also assigned no value or no particular attention to those positions that are, due to market forces, much harder to fill because they demand higher salaries due to specialized skills or certifications. Things like computer programmers, accountants, some of the positions in our system that have represented challenges with talent attraction. these organizational values have been in place since the 90s, and over time, that's a lot of what created the salary compression that the board's been hearing about and that the employees are frustrated with now, because increases that have typically been across the board cost of living increases actually move up the entire pay scale instead of moving up employees on the scale based upon their service, longevity, or any other parameter. So it's the COLA-based system that failed to adjust pay scales in consideration of external market forces and failed to reward employees for longevity with the county. I also want to explain that there are two kinds of longevity, one of which was looked at as in the Evergreen study and one which was not. At least in terms that I can comprehend, and so I would suggest to you, there is time in position longevity. How long have you been doing the job that you are doing? And then there is time with employer longevity. How long have you been working for the county in any position? Mr. Briner talked about an example, that himself being the example of someone who has significant time with employer longevity, but relatively very small time in position longevity. And again, the Evergreen set of recommendations and their model for compensation recognizes time in position longevity, does not recognize time with employer longevity. So, taking the Evergreen result and beginning to work on an implementation plan, we had a couple of factors to consider. Number one is, if we don't keep pace with the changes in cost of living over time, then we simply lose ground. There's no point in going backwards. So we do want to look at a published, reliable data source for a true cost of living. This year's published level was 1.3%, and Mary may have some better additional detail on how we look at that in the presentation. But the cost of living is an element. Another element is the time with employer longevity, because that, again, was not included in the Evergreen model and the Evergreen analysis, but we feel that there are really two different layers of value, and great minds can disagree over which is more valuable, but frankly, within the constraints and the practical constraints we're operating with, the parameters that we're talking about are very small. We are looking at and recommending adjustments for compensation that are based in part on time with the county longevity, as well as adjustments based on the Evergreen recommendations, which include both market analysis and time in position longevity. So, compensation adjustments have been developed, recommended compensation adjustments have been developed with all of these factors wound in or baked in, as Rose likes to say. And as a result, the range of adjustments extends from 0, it's right under the plan we're proposing, some, and there are just a few employees that would get nothing, to a high of 10.66%, and that's a single employee who's been with us for more than a dozen years and whose salary is below average actually for all workers in the county, according to state statistics, and whose 10.66% pay adjustment actually amounts to less than $4,000 in delta, and that is to catch up I think a unique case with the market. So to be clear, an alternative to the plan we're proposing would be to simply give everybody a 3.2% pay increase across the board, a cost of living increase as we have in the past. That's typically what we've done over the past 20 years. And the problem with that approach is that that would simply perpetuate the salary compression problems that we have. It would not meaningfully address the attrition problems that we have, and it would not meaningfully address the talent attraction challenges that we have in certain departments with certain skill sets. So the proposal is still with the average compensation adjustment of 3.2%, but in a plan that has a range from 0 to 10.66. I'm going to point out that the we is a team, and most of the team, but not all of the team, is here. The we is included HR Director Rose Hayward. Leslie Moore is here, her generalist. Leslie, thank you for being here. My deputies, Mark Cole and Ed Petrovich, our Finance Director, Mary Sorrell, and myself. And yes, there was a comment that this has taken a long time. That's right. It's been an arduous process to consider not just the evergreen recommendations, but a plurality of other factors, to consider different strategies for compensation, of compensation philosophy and approaches to adjustment. We realize this is a multi-year recommendation or multi-year correction to achieve the evergreen outcomes, and that the board is only speaking and has only appropriated to FY18, and I respect that a great deal. We ask the board's concurrence and direction to proceed on the path of the recommendation, and I'll turn it over to Rose for the presentation, but I wanted to give that background to catch us up to how we got to where we are today, and to be very clear that if we, first of all, if we can take the step forward that's outlined in the proposal, I think that is a step in the right direction for the implementation of a more robust and useful and employee-friendly, market-realistic compensation strategy into our future. And we will have to look again next year at the realities of available funds, cost of living, and other factors, and next year will be next year, and the third year following will be the third year following. So this is just a proposal for FY18, and with that, thank you, Rose.
Yikes. Okay, hopefully you can hear me now. Is that better? If we could have the floor computer, please. Okay, so as Mr. Taylor mentioned in his opening comments, that probably gave you a little bit of a background as to how we got here and how we came to doing a total compensation study at this point. We did do a study, as you're aware, in tandem with the schools. I will let you know that what we're recommending today is just for the county side. And we will, in the next few minutes, go over our study methodology as well as some of the findings that came out of the study and then some of the recommendations. So in terms of the study methodology, there were four main components, if you will. The first is employee outreach, and the employee outreach involved focus groups as well as interviews to collect data from employees that actually work here. There also was a JAT, or a job assessment tool, that was used, and this was actually a questionnaire, if you will, that went out electronically to employees that actually performed the duties. So if you were in a firefighter role, it went to a firefighter and asked them a set of questions related to their specific duties. Then all of the JATs that were completed actually were reviewed by the supervisor of that position as well to provide an additional layer of validating the data that was collected. Market survey actually was part of the methodology as well, where Evergreen went out, sent questionnaires to various localities that we compete with for talent to get a sense of what the positions were that they had, what are the salary ranges associated with those positions, and then also what are the benefits that are provided by those localities. And then the last component that was used was position slotting and salary placement. And that actually involves establishing grades on a pay scale. And then there are pay ranges associated with each of those grades. And then looking at your existing employees and where their salaries are, and then slotting them or positioning them on that proposed pay scale. As Mr. Taylor had mentioned, we have come to realize there's some different findings, if you will. One of the major ones was that around compression, as he mentioned. I do want to not overlook the fact that there were some positive findings as well. I mean, there were employees that spoke about the fact that they felt like we had, a solid benefits package. There were some employees that mentioned that they liked working for Spotsylvania County. They enjoy their colleagues. They enjoy the work that they do. And they also enjoy the location. They enjoy not having to commute as many folks in Spotsylvania do. And then for some of our more tenured employees, they mentioned and cited, how in the past they would have steady raises, there would be opportunities for advancement, although it was also noted that that was less in recent years. Some of the concerns that were mentioned, along with compression, were related to workload. And there are specific departments where we have seen high levels of attrition that are related to the workload. There also was mention of limited development opportunities and career opportunities as a concern, and then compression, as we mentioned. And then also, too, there were some citations around longevity and rewards that may be limited in relation to that. Taking into account our findings is where we came up with our goals and objectives. What is it we're really looking to accomplish is kind of the question we asked ourselves as we looked at putting in proposed recommendations for you. The first goal is related to alleviating salary compression. And I've often been quoted as saying, you don't get yourself into the situation we're in 11 years and then get out of it in 1 year. And so a lot of the recommendations that we're going to be making are going to address compression, but as was stated by Mr. Langridge, it's not going to happen in 1 year because the compression wasn't created in a year. But we are looking to do some things that will move us in the right direction, that will get us to a better place than where we are now. Our second goal is related to salary adjustments to compete with the market. So looking at proposing a salary scale that's competitive, as well as looking at slotting existing employees on that scale in an appropriate place. We want to look at keeping pace with the economy and guarding against future compression. I mean, we're kind of learning the hard way what the results are of having frozen raises for long periods of time and eliminating merit increases for long periods of time. When you do that, it's really difficult to recover. And so once we get to a place where we're positioned better in the market, we'd like to maintain that. As well as, I think it's worth mentioning as well that, this board did adopt a compensation philosophy that has as a standard a 3-year run of a formal total compensation study. And so one of our proposals would be that let's make the efforts and let's make the commitment now to not be in this position year after year after year. But
Rose, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to highlight the point along the way here because I think it's very important. We made the choice in the process in selecting Evergreen. We did not just buy one study. We bought the tool, the study methodology, so that we will be able, without undue burden, or certainly without having to go back out to another procurement and start over again with a new tool, a different system. We have the tool to be able to continue to update ourselves analytically into the future, so we can track with the philosophy.
And then the fourth goal, we've heard from the board that it's really important that we not just give pay increases without it being tied somewhat to performance. And so we want to reassert that we are making that commitment that, we are not going to recommend a pay increase for someone who's not at least performing at or above the standard that's been set. And so these are the goals that we have established. The objectives that we have listed here are going to be the efforts we're making to achieve those goals. We want to reduce unwanted attrition. We want to decompress the salaries by rewarding longevity. I appreciate the point that Mr. Briner made about loyalty. That was actually in my upcoming comments, this idea that we do want to recognize and reward employees who have been committed, who have been loyal. So that's one of the things that we're looking to do in our recommendations. We want to build morale by affirming employee performance. We have a lot of employees that work really hard, that are highly committed and deliver on results. We want to make sure that we're reinforcing that. And then we want to establish stronger compensation studies, both in the present and in the future, so we can alleviate this going forward. So we get to some of our recommendations that we're making. The first being we're looking at a new compensation pay scale that was recommended by Evergreen. We're looking at a COLA that would provide a 1.3% increase to base salary. We are looking at a longevity salary adjustment and then a classification date parity increase. And then I'll give a little more detail on each of those. So the new compensation pay scale will align the salaries to the market. It creates consistency in the midpoint progression at 5%. So what a midpoint progression is that if you look at the salary grades, and let's say it's a 21 and then a 22, the midpoint progression is, it's a 5% difference between like the minimum of 21 and the minimum of 22. That's what the midpoint progression is. Best practices for compensation is that you want to have some consistency in your midpoint progression. Also, a 60% spread is typically thought of as a best case scenario. The 60-point spread is basically at the minimum and the maximum, it's a 60% spread there. And then just a notation here as to where you can find that proposed pay scale in the compensation report. Cost of living adjustment, or more affectionately called COLA. We are proposing that all employees who have at least 1 year of service as of July 1 would be eligible for a COLA. It would be 1.3% to base salary, and it is based on the All Urban Consumer Price Index. The longevity salary adjustment. What we are proposing here is that we would like to suggest that we want to not only recognize where employees fall within the pay range that's proposed and years of service within their current position, but also recognize their entire tenure with the county. So again, reinforcing and rewarding employees that have been loyal and have been committed to the county. So our recommendation here is that if you have been with the county for 0 to 4.9 years, you would not receive a longevity salary adjustment. 5 to 9.9 years, you would get 1% added to your base salary. 10 to 14.9, 2%, and then 15 or more, you would get 3%. Originally, when we had placed this presentation out, we were considering an additional layer at, for employees with 20 or more years at 4%. In doing some additional review of the budget, as well as considering again our goals, we had decided that it would actually be better to eliminate that last layer because quite frankly, we don't see attrition at the 20+ level. Not to suggest that employees shouldn't be rewarded for being at that level of service, and we certainly appreciate their efforts. But keeping in mind our goal of wanting to really position ourselves to maintain and retain people, that was the reason for eliminating that layer.
Well, Rose, before you leave that slide, I don't think we really want to suggest either that any of us thinks that 5 to 9.9 years of loyalty is only worth 1%. What we want to suggest is that that's what we can do now in this layer, in this period of implementation, to begin to address decompression, and would suggest that in future years that we would want to come back to decompression adjustments again, not the same adjustments, but different ones with different periods and different levels of reward than those that are on this table. This is just a beginning.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Okay, so you've eliminated the 20 plus at 4%. So I know what your goals are is eliminate the attrition. But, you know, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I had plenty of senior people here that you know, my problem with this is that you need that experience. You need that 20, you need that 25-year-old person there to teach these younger people and to lead this organization. So number one, what I'd like to know is how many people are we talking about here? Because just because it doesn't fit into the elimination of a position, they should still come under longevity and be rewarded for doing exactly what they've done, is taking that job and been here, accepting the lower salary rather than moving on to something. And I think I would really like you to look at that again and give us a cost factor, because that to me is the most important thing, and I've heard it since my tenure on this board, is that we're losing good people that could go to, now we're losing, they're staying around. But that's just because they're loyal to us doesn't mean that we shouldn't compensate them for their experience. And I think the experience is one of the most important things we can have on any, whether it be firefighters or whether it be police officers. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, the last salary recommendation that we're making is the classification date parity. And I do want to apologize and clarify that we had put in an initial slide, and I want to emphasize the fact that this is purely theoretical. So when you look at this and you do the math, it looks like the person's going to get a 22% increase, and no one's getting a 22% increase.
So this is a hypothetical example. This is not one row off of the compensation chart.
Correct.
This was just for illustrative purposes only, and as the math works out, we realize it's a bad example because it's outside of the range of what we're recommending. But it will illustrate in fairly simple terms how the math works.
Yeah, so the intention of this particular model is to address compression. And how it works is that you take an employee and you actually place them where they would be on the grade based on their length of service in that current position. It doesn't take into account their full length of service, it just takes into account their current position. And so you see here structured, you know, the current salary, the employees at 15 years, you see the proposed salary range. You would look at the middle of that proposed salary range, and then you'd make a calculation and figure out what the new salary would be. In the next slide, I do kind of illustrate what this might look like in phase one, which is what we're proposing in terms of implementation of this particular model. So you wouldn't be looking at giving the person the entire pay increase that's recommended. You would actually look at giving them 33.3% of the proposed total salary increase that's recommended. And so this next slide illustrates what that would look like.
If I can jump in here, Rose, it's actually 33. The pay increase is based upon the three factors, if you will: the cost of living, the 1.3%, which is applied to the current salary, and then the longevity for years of service with the organization. And then the third piece is the basically time entitled or the pay parity. That 33% is actually 1/3 of the pay parity that was actually recommended. If you look back at the Evergreen, that is what Evergreen was proposing on its own. That gap would be
based upon only on that parity. So when we say the 33% is just that pay parity piece, not the total pay increase.
This last slide gives a timeline, if you will, a recommended timeline for implementation. So we have looked at the compensation reports and finalized those. We're here today making a presentation to the board. We will be meeting with all of the department directors to review in detail, like literally line by line, each employee, and get their input in terms of the salary recommendations that are being proposed. We'd also be looking at publishing the new compensation scale, if adopted, and then communicating an implementation plan to employees. And then, from there you see sort of the logistics of implementing the pay increases. We're, at this point, this concludes the presentation. We're really asking for
Not
your
until Mary tells us that this fits within the money we have in the budget. Mary,
Yes, sir, it does.
which is why you're there.
Yes, it does fit within the money that is budgeted in the fiscal year 18.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. McCall.
Just a couple, go back one slide, and it seems like you've added some slides since the earlier presentation, which is good. So my understanding here, just at this evergreen adjustment, so the way I read it, everybody gets a 1.3% COLA, longevity based on where you fit within the years of service based on the 1, 2, or 3%.
Not everybody. Folks that have been here one
Yeah,
year.
well, based on the
Based
chart.
this.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
Correct,
yes.
okay. Everybody above 1 year gets 1.3%. And then there was the 1, 2, or 3% increase based on your longevity in the county. And then evergreen adjustment, that is 1/3 of their recommended increase, is that what that? Yes. Okay, so potentially, if you implemented a 3-year phase plan, you would give that same increase over the next 2 years as well. And that would,
Second, third, and the third
Okay.
third of the compensation piece of it.
okay.
would
Well, that's not exactly right, Mr. McLaughlin, because what we did was we applied the 1.3% to the employee's current salary, which brought that up 1.3% for the current
Okay.
salary, which brought the delta, if you look at the delta in the evergreen, it reduces the delta by that 1.3% from the current. Then we applied the
Longevity.
longevity, and that further reduced what Evergreen recommended. And then we took 1/3 of the delta from the current salary with the COLA and the longevity applied, because you have to do it that way so that you're not basically paying more than what Evergreen had recommended. And when we did that for a large portion of the employees, the 1.3% plus the longevity took care of
The delta.
the delta. The delta remaining for Evergreen was 0.
So I think what you said also, that you're basically going to go with the department heads and go employee by employee and place them somewhere on the scale? Is that-
We've done that work already. We're going to go to the department heads and actually go line by line through the proposed. So what it would look like for the COLA, the longevity, and the evergreen at phase 1, just to validate that the performance is in line and there's nothing we're missing in terms of proposing the increase.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, another factor in the whether or not a raise is given is performance.
Right.
If somebody is performing below standards, they will not even get the COLA. And one of the things that for the people who are getting a greater than the standard raise, we are going to sit down with their directors and make sure they're okay with that, because we don't want to reward somebody who may have been a marginal performer, and I expect that there are very few of those, but with a big raise, and so that's why we're bouncing the list off with the directors.
So I had gotten, some folks have sent me questions over the last period of time, and some of these are not easy to answer now, so I'll forward these to you. But I think, and a lot of these are really based on, and both speakers earlier talked about compression and the concern about you know, I have a brand-new promoted lieutenant who should be paying more than the patrol officer or the firefighter, but how do you make it worthwhile to be promoted? So there's got to be that jump at least in that next rank. And I guess as we look at this, you roll it out with salaries, are we looking at that to make sure that we have 2 firefighters, one just got promoted to lieutenant, that he's going to make something that makes it worthwhile to be in that leadership position?
And that's one of the reasons we want to sit down with the directors one-on-one, was to look at that and to make sure that we're not missing something and creating some other internal inequity, you know, that we may have missed in the process that we're not aware of.
So I'll ask 2 of the questions, then I'll forward them to answer them later. But one was public safety is on a 25-year retirement, Vice 30. Is that?
It's typical.
So how was that taken into consideration as far as when you're building the, or does that affect it?
The way that Evergreen actually structured it, it's based on a 30-year, and that's just how the model is set up. That's not to suggest that.
So not to interrupt, but I mean, since we, as you mentioned, we own the model, can you run it with 25 years and see what the impact is and see if it makes a difference, or should we do that for the public safety employees to see if there's a change there? And are the pay scales the same between, and I hate to say there's public safety and general services, but I mean, are the scales similar, or how do you adjust the scales, or how are they set?
It's all one scale. There's not a separate scale for FREM or the sheriff's office or general county employees. They're all on a G scale, and they range all the way in grade from Rose, I think it's a grade.
It's like 1 all the way to
all the way to 33.
Okay, so they're basically the same. There's
Right.
You can be a firefighter today and work in utilities, the same grade structure.
Yes.
Now,
Well, depending upon the position that you're going to go to,
Correct.
because those based on those those JATs,
Yeah.
those positions were slotted based upon the responsibility of the position. There were 5 or 6 different criteria that were used to decide where those positions throughout the county go on the pay scale.
Okay, I'll forward these other questions to you so you can get a quick response back to me, and I'll feed them back out. Thanks.
Mr. Skinner?
Excuse me, upon Mr. McLaughlin's question, okay? Years past, we didn't have the equal for a lieutenant in the fire department, lieutenant in the police department. Have we, and I know we have attempted to clear that matter up. Is it equal today? We just talked about, you know, is it equal, as he asked the question. Are we taking the same position? Are both positions equal today? Have we, because this has been an issue that we've had in the past, and we've tried to compensate the fire department, I believe it was, to bring up to the police department. And have we reached that goal of compensation, equal compensation for that rank or that rate? Because I know it was a question in the past.
Yeah, that's something I'd actually have to look at, and we can certainly get you.
I'd like you to do that before, because to answer his question, we need to know the problem we had 2-3 years ago that we tried to make sure that we really are comparing equal rates to equal responsibilities and jobs, or whatever you want to call it. And the last question I have is under your last slide, or the slide you had 1/3 from the if you can bring that of the evergreen adjustment of
Right.
1/3. Does that mean we're going to do, and how many years time frame are we going to try to work this? It's not going to happen in all 1 year, correct?
Correct. We're proposing that would happen over a 3-year period.
A 3-year period.
So it'd be
Okay.
1/3 this year, and then 1/3 potentially in FY19 and then FY20.
Okay, so 18, 19, and 20 are 3 years. Okay. The only question I have is, how do we keep up over a 3-year period with what's really happening out in the other localities?
That's the reason, Mr. Skinner, that we're also proposing a COLA. And we would also propose that we look at, on an annual basis, the cost of living based upon a published index for the cost of living in this area, because that's what keeps us up to market once we get ourselves there. So that was the reason that we proposed the 1.3% COLA this year,
because the salaries that were actually used in the study, correct me if I'm wrong, were actually a year behind where we're already at. So, you know, we were already year one falling behind. So that's the reason that we looked at a 1.3% COLA this year. And moving forward, this is really a change in the compensation, the way the compensation package has been done historically with the county over the last, I'd say, 15 years. You know, we didn't look at keeping up with market on an annual basis, at least since 2006 or 2007. And then we had the pay compression over those same 11 or 12 years because we didn't give merits to move people along. So that's how we got into the situation over the last 11, 12, or 15 years, whatever it was. So again, we're not going to dig this out overnight, but we do need, moving forward, we need to be able to look at it on an annual basis and use the model that we purchased to make sure that we don't dig ourselves back into a hole after we get ourselves out.
And the strategy or the philosophy will, I would hope, continue to have these three basic elements. To look at the cost of living and include that against a real index, to look at what can we do on a varied strategy to address decompression. In other words, to give small rewards for years of time as a county employee, and to continue third prong to march toward the evergreen recommendations on the market analysis and the time in position longevity. And then when we get out to year 4, we will select for a new set of positions to study in the market and use the evergreen tool and start the process over again. So it will be a continuing evolution, but by continuing to use these three strategies, we won't fall behind the cost of living. We will gradually grow into recognition of longevity for time with the employer, and we will move toward market and toward rewarding time in position in a rational manner as dollars allow.
Mr. Chair, can I ask another quick one here? Just so with what you stated there. So this costs 2.3 rough. Well, what you're proposing today is how much per annual? What is that?
Total cost of the proposal as it stands today?
No, for what you are implementing, what you're suggesting to implement on the
About 2.1.
2.1.
Yes, sir.
And without that, just the 2% COLA would have been about how much?
About $1 million.
About $1 million. So it's about $1 million. It's about $1 million additional. So next year, if we implemented this again, we'd be looking for about an additional $1 million over the next 2 years, in addition to what we have been trying to get over the past. So I mean, that's the target we're looking for, is additional $1 million next year and the next year if we want to implement the full study.
I would think, Mr. McLaughlin, it would be less.
Slightly less.
Because like I said before, as you do the COLA adjustment and as you do the longevity, and if we look at longevity again next year, that'll further reduce the parity piece. So as we chip away at one piece, we're reducing the delta on the evergreen.
So, but for planning, probably worst case is an additional $1 million a year for the next 2 years to maintain, or at least to get up to where the study recommended?
I think it'd be
I'd say
something less
hopefully
than that.
not, probably.
I didn't want to say that without looking at Mary.
I
but
think it'd
yes,
be about $1
think
million
it'll be less.
over the 2 years to get up to
get to
just
where-
address the evergreen study.
Okay.
And just as a
Okay.
point of clarification, we've mentioned a couple of times the $1.8 million that's noted in the study. That is salaries only. That did not factor any of the associated benefit costs with payroll taxes, VRS, that type of stuff. So the total cost would have been more than 1.8. If anybody's doing the numbers in their head out in the audience, trying to figure out how these all work, that's something that I don't think people have recognized within that study.
Thanks.
Anybody else? All right.
So we will be,
Well, I got a few questions.
oh, yes, sir. Sorry,
Comments?
excuse me.
I guess, I mean, it's nothing against what's been said or presented or anything else, but the study in general. I mean, my understanding from the study was 1.8 million. And I believe one of my direct questions was, will this take care of the compression? And everybody at the table was, yep. And obviously that's not true. My understanding was that 1.8 million would take care of all our issues, I guess, except for the benefits and et cetera, which wasn't explained either. But my assumption was, and of course, every time I assume something, it seems like it's incorrect. So one of these days I'll stop assuming. But that was going to be, everything would be taken care of. That was my understanding from this Evergreen study. I'm a little concerned that we did not get with the directors prior to this and maybe work with them a little bit more hand in hand, and especially with I can only speak on public safety. The chief, the sheriff, Mr. Langridge, and Mr. Briner. They can certainly bring a lot of individual examples of what's going on. And we're still going to be left, even with this today, there is no incentive to promote in this county. Almost zero. If you promote at any decent pace whatsoever, and you bust your tail to get the education that is now being required, all the training, all the levels of training, you're busting your tail in. And there's certain individuals out there that are motivated enough to try to do this and to better themselves and to maybe get to a point where they can make some positive changes towards things they didn't like when they were down a little lower. And it just frustrates me that we're still there. We're still going to drag this out a little longer. Also, I'd like to see some more examples, if you don't mind, as compared to this Evergreen study and where it's going to take us in some graphs or something. Because we mentioned the Evergreen study, but daggone, I don't have it with me. Matter of fact, I meant to bring it so I could actually flip some pages and maybe see from the presentation that we're going to be given what we're talking about specifically. So I'd really like to see some more visual information as far as what we're planning and what it does to the graphs and stuff that we were supplied by Evergreen, and where is it taking us specifically. We also got to look at the schools are going to be in the same boat. Their Evergreen study, which I'll just leave it with that in a word, is I think the number we got was 7 million to accommodate them. Well, they told us 1.8, and we're already up to 2.1, and we need another 2 million each year to make that work, which I think is going to be more by the time when you really dig into it. And plus, if we don't do any adjustments, if we do the 1 million and don't do any other adjustments, we're still going to be digging ourselves back in the hole. I think it's going to be imperative for us if we want to fix this once and for all. And yes, the budget's a very fluid process, and Lord knows our economy is a very fluid situation. But we got to at least come up with some plans where we know what's going to be the my words slip me, but what's going to happen if we don't do things. And I think we've seen that over the years with this board. And I was with this county for actually longer than that. I don't know how long. It was a long time, it felt like. And we never corrected anything. The boards, the pay, it never corrected itself. If you went up through the ranks, you never got to a midpoint. You never got to a max. You had employees far below you that were making comparable to what you were making. And it is frustrating when you get to how long you actually, in the long term, stay with the county. And after, you bust your tail in to follow the rules and the general orders and the SOPs and to do what it takes and it's spelled out for you to promote and get where you hope to be in one day. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping around, and I apologize. Another problem we've had is with these base salaries, increasing those as we've increased everything else. And I hope that's going to be addressed from here on out. Quit raising these base salaries and, until information is obtained or statistical data is given where it needs to be raised. We keep on raising, you give everybody 1.3, but at the same time, we put 1.3 towards a base salary. It does nothing. But I'd also like, I guess I'll get back to the proposals. I would like to see a 2-year and a 3-year plan presented to us. Just me, I don't know what, I hope other board members hope you don't, I'm not trying to speak out of turn or anything. This is just something, I'm kind of speaking off cuff as usual, but I'd like to see that presented to us. And where it's going to take, and with the information, graphs, et cetera, where it's going to take us along with this evergreen study, where it's going to put us. But I'd like to see 2- and 3-year plans presented to us. And I know one thing we didn't hit on was, some of the, like the sick leave being used at your retirement, towards your retirement at the end of your career. And I know this is off the evergreen study, but, I definitely want to, and I think all the rest of the board members, you probably don't remember it, but I did supply you with some information from Doug Albright, and I'm probably not saying his name right, and former Chief Daly in reference to some tax benefits that is spelled out and that they could possibly use. I'd like to see that done and implemented. I know VRS is not accepting any applications for that till October or November this year, but I really want to see us move towards that. There's no reason we, if they've provided a statute which will allow a retiree to save $20, so be it. And I'd really like to see that. But as far as this evergreen study, I'm not impressed. Like I say, and I think I'm very frustrated in what was presented and told to us to our faces as far as what will happen and what will be done and a cure-all. And I know it's not your, Mr. Taylor and everybody, I know it's not y'all's fault, but it just frustrates me that, I was thinking 1.8 and now it's turned around, it's not even close.
If I may, Mr. Benton, to address that, the 1.8 only addressed the pay parity. And like Mary said, it didn't address any benefits.
Well, not for my question that I specifically asked.
Right.
I specifically asked the head there that,
Right.
will this take care of the compression? 1.8 is going to take care of all these issues, the compression, et cetera, et cetera. And I was told, well, it was a yes.
Yeah, and that's why it took so long, because when we realized, based on comments by Mr. Biner about longevity within the organization, not just time and title,
Right.
because the Evergreen solution was just to look at time and title. It didn't look at the fact that the cost of living we had already fallen behind from the numbers that they used in the Evergreen study, by a year, and that was 1.3% based upon the published cost of living increase for this area. So that's where the 1.3% came from that wasn't included in the Evergreen study. And then the time in service longevity to address exactly what you were talking about, that employees that were hired, and were here 5 years and received relatively nothing in the way of pay increases, were making the same as somebody coming through the door. So to address that, that's why we added the longevity for time within the organization to try to decompress that part and address that issue, which again wasn't included.
Well, maybe this should have been brought to our attention, though. Instead of the lady sitting there nodding her head yes and giving, if we're not given information and we're told things, or contrary information, and we're just told things straight out, you tend to believe what you're told. But I'm learning quickly you got to really ask some really deep questions, and it's very frustrating where somebody doesn't speak up and say, well, hold on now.
Right. And if you just took the 1.8 million and just threw it at that as they recommended, it wouldn't address the other issues that we're looking at, and we'd already be behind.
Well, I just hope we can get to a point where we have a plan where we can go every year and pretty much know what we're going to have to spend on salaries to keep up with where we should. And then it would be this board or other boards' decisions to make whether they follow through with it or not. based on economy and the county's overall situation. But, it's every year that this comes up. Every single year for as long as I ever remember, it's been status quo, and, this is what we do.
Right, and that's the culture that we're trying to change here moving forward, because if you do keep up with it on an annual basis, it's going to cost less. Right now, we're paying to dig out of the hole that was created over the last 15 years. So once we're out, it's just like anything else, if we keep up and pay as we go, the out years, the second year and the third year, even of the phase-in, will be less than what we're paying this year. And then the out years will be tied to a COLA and some small, incremental increase for longevity within the organization. And then every 3 years or so, look at the parity or time in position with the model. But we're just trying to dig ourselves out of a hole that was created over the last 15 years or so.
I understand.
Mr. Vice Chairman,
Mr. Jack, sorry.
if you're finished, I was just going to jump in.
Go ahead.
Are you done? Yes, sir. Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything, but I'm sitting here listening, and I'm wondering if we can play back this conversation at budget time, because it always seems like at budget time we forget the obligations that we commit ourselves to, and we should commit ourselves to. Our employees are the backbone of our organization, and if we do not have and value our employees, then our organization takes a hit, and thereby our community is failed because of our inaction. I think that the recession, yes, absolutely had a monumental impact on what was going on, but the beginning of that was 10 years or so ago. We're coming out of that, and one thing that we need to realize as a board is that it takes revenue to do these things. And it's very easy to sit here and say that we want to, pay our employees more, and we want to make sure that they're compensated, and we want to make sure all this stuff is done, but here it is June. I wonder what is going to be said in our pre-budget meeting in October and November. And then when it comes around to the hearings in January and February, what are we then going to say? I'm committed to it. And I'm not going to speak for any other board member, but I will raise the issue that over the past several years, there seems to have been this mindset that we can cut back, we can reduce the rate here and there, we can not do certain things, and it'll just figure itself out in the future. And sitting here listening to this and then realizing that the schools, which are 3 times the size of the county when it comes to employees, if we're looking at 2 million, let's just assume that they're at least triple, so $6 to $7 million worth of necessary funds to bring them also to the level that they need to be at. I do not think that it is fair or right to go ahead and not do that simply because we hold the purse strings and we go ahead and we fund the things that we think that we should be funding. So if you look, let's just say for next year, an additional $8 million of revenue that might be needed to bring up the pay for the county side and the school side. Where's that money coming from? Our budget this year increased by a little over 1%, maybe 1.5%. And there doesn't seem to be a will to go ahead and do the things that are necessary. That's why I'm glad that we have a discussion coming up at the end of the month for a strategic plan, because I think it is well past time that we realize that to have a top-notch organization on the county side and the school side, it takes revenue. And I'm not one to advocate for willy-nilly throwing money at whatever problem comes along just to do that. But if we have our employees that are obviously underpaid, as the study has stated, in many cases, and it takes a lot of money to bring them up to where they need to be, I'm not very, the future doesn't look very promising. Let's just put it that way. And it really does bother me that we're obligating ourselves, and then this conversation will be forgotten in November and December. Like I said, I am committed to it. I know, Mr. Benton, you had brought this up, and from your comments, I would assume that you are too, not to put words in your mouth, but we need revenue to do these things. And this is just the operating side. This is just the salary side, not even to think of all of the other costs that are associated with our county and as we move ahead. So I would really like to have the board think about what we're committing ourselves to and the necessity of what we're committing ourselves to. And because there is a cost associated with that, and it's going to be big and it's going to be necessary, but it does need to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I want to thank you guys for the hard work that you've put into this presentation and the direction that we're going. Been there and done that in the past, and it's not an easy task whatsoever. I think this is not finalized. This is not going to be the be all and do all, but it's a step in the right direction. We have too long in this county stepped on the backs of our employees for budget considerations, and I think this is going to turn that around. And that's what I'm looking forward to, and I thank you guys again for what we're doing. I think everybody's going to get something out of it this year, and I hope in the following years we get that extra 2/3 in, and we re-implement the tool that we have and continue to compensate our employees properly. Thank you.
And I'll just, I don't mean it. I hope y'all aren't taking it that I'm attacking you yourselves. Please don't. It's just frustrating on what the information we were initially given by Evergreen and what we were initially told, and then to find out things, there's different aspects to it or stuff to it that wasn't, I don't think, fully disclosed or presented to us. I would like for y'all to move, I'm not talking out of turn, but I'd like to see you move forward with what you're doing. But I would, for one, would like another presentation, if we can, in this month, June, and if at all possible, and actually show us the other plans. But I want to see some specifics and about where it's going to take us as far as that study and how it's going to correct some of the compression issues that are obviously there, and some of the other issues with the folks that have been with us for long periods of time, to try to get these folks squared away, and then to continue this. A plan to actually continue to where we don't get have to dig out of a hole the next couple of years and do the same thing over and over. But I appreciate your work and your dedication to trying to get us to where we need to be. And for the employees out there, just all I can tell you as a former employee, I'm there with you. I lived it. You know, we had our good years and we certainly had our bad years. But I'm telling you, this county, overall, I think the county tries to do the best it can for us, and we're allowed a lot of benefits that a lot of other folks don't get. We have a decent retirement system, at least for the ones under Tier 1, maybe Tier 2. I don't know anything about the others. But please stick with us. I think you can see from the conversation here tonight that we're trying to move in the right direction. It's obviously not going to happen overnight, and I'm hoping 3 years at max, and I'm really hoping we can get it done in 2. And I am dedicated to this. So, thank you.
Mr. Benton, if I may briefly, it is a matter of necessity toward the implementation that we would bring back to you on the 27th of this month the finalized classification tables that we're recommending, because those need to be adopted by the board as part of the personnel policy in order to make this implementation work. Along with that, you did ask for the 25-year horizon for public safety employees. I'm hoping, given the very limited time available, that that will be possible. We will do our very best. We may have to do this year on the 30-year chart, or we may have to look at, because all of the positions are classified together on the same chart, that is a 30-year chart. The other alternative would be to look at a 25-year chart across the board and use that for the general government employees as well as public safety. You say, well, won't that create a problem with the folks at the top of the pay scale? And haven't we seen that? And what about those that are been here with the county 20 years or greater? Well, the 25-year chart would create a situation that would be bumping general government employees against the top of the scale, but I would want to suggest to you that strategically and as a matter of compensation philosophy, that may not be a bad thing. Because in my experience in local government for 30 years, I've seen two breeds of cat, to be candid with you, two different sorts of 20 to 25 or even 30-year employees. There are those who continue to perform and excel and demonstrate value in the organization, and there are those who are marking time and are sometimes lightly referred to as being retired in place. And so to have a system that is rewarding longevity based on merely years out at the high end of the scale may not be in our best interest. That may be a level at which we need to focus on rewarding performance and consider being more generous than we have been about rewarding superstars that are in that long-time employee category, but not have necessarily pay increments for those that are of the performing at the level. It's adequate performance, but it's not contributing to the organization at a level that we would expect for a senior stateswoman or a senior statesman to be performing. So there are some nuances to this, and that takes me back to your frustration, and Mr. Benton, I agree with you 100%. Because I heard the same thing that you did about the 1.8 million solving the problem. And the 1.8 million solution appeared to be the solution until we realized that it did not consider the time with the employer longevity at all. Evergreen considered only time in position longevity. Why? Because that was their professional recommendation of a sound compensation philosophy. We realized from comments from the workforce and comments from the board that there was a need for our organization, in part because going back to the late 90s, there was part of our culture here, the idea that we will not reward longevity. Time continuing to work in the same position or time continuing to work for the county was not, as a matter of our pay philosophy, was not rewarded. So we realized, looking at the Evergreen result, as we dug into it, wait a minute, they have not addressed an issue that we believe and that the employees believe and that the board has said publicly is fundamentally important. We need to do something to address the longevity with the employer. So I am very sorry. I am as frustrated as you are, I guarantee you, that we've had to look at that additional element of compensation philosophy, but I think it is fair and right and to the good of the organization that we've done so. So we will work on finalizing employee by employee with the departments, the adjustments and putting together the compensation charts and have those back for you in the best form that we can on the 27th, because action by the board on that date is necessary in order to implement this program and get it in place so that employees will see the effect of it in July and see it in their first paycheck in August. And so that we are doing our very best, Mr. Benton. I agree with your frustration, and I want the employees to know as well we are doing our very best for them. And as a matter of illustration, I left out the specific examples later, but I know there are a lot of uniforms in the audience, and I want to mention here that in public safety, the range, the typical range of increases that we're looking at is from the span of about 5.5% on up to nearly 8.5%. So there is relief targeted relief consistent with the methodologies explained here for public safety, for the whole organization, for social services, for places that we've had real problems with attrition and talent attraction. We're doing the best we can, sir.
Well, not to put you on a timeline, but then if we can just be provided, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn, if we can just be provided what this does, I'd like to see some, again, I'd like to see some graphs
On the
as compared to
27th,
the
we'll bring as much as we
Evergreen.
can.
And then maybe after that, you can concentrate on the plan or plans for the next couple of years or year for the continuation of this or the additional implementation, and then how you plan on continuing to keep us out of the hole. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mary, I just, something that's going through the back of my mind there, always thinking about budget. We seem to have, as you stated, the adequate funds to take care of this. But we also have another part of this county that's going through the same process, and that being the school system. And what are we going to do with their implementation? I have no clue on what they're going to be asking for, but that money's got to come from someplace, and it's got to come from someplace probably before we have a new budget period and a new budget set. How are we going to handle that?
You're right. I mean, we haven't heard from them about how they plan to pursue or to handle the information that they've received. I know they've made their presentation, but it will be a budget issue, and it is not something that we can address with one-time funding. These are ongoing costs. Once we make these commitments, they have to be funded every year. So it is important that we understand that. I would, the budget's been brought up a couple times. I would suggest to you all too, every year we have a pre-budget public hearing and we ask you all, help us understand what your priorities are. If the priority is to get this done in 2 years, or to at least get it done in 3 years, let us know that. We have to have that direction from the beginning, so when the county administrator is crafting his budget, he understands what the priorities are. And it's that simple, and everything comes with a cost. We deal with it every year. I understand as an employee, a 30-year employee of the county, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen the employee side and I've seen the budget side. This is not an easy decision that needs to be made. I would suggest to you that you give us the opportunity to sit and talk to the directors. As a director, in my new position as a director, I know what it means to me to be able to look at these with my employees and see what I think it means, and I think if you'll give each of us, give county administration the opportunity to do that with each of the directors, let them sit down and look at that so that they can make sure they're comfortable, and I'm hoping that you will find that when they see these results of what we've done and the way we've turned this around from taking what we got from Evergreen, applying what we learned, and going through these 3 steps, that it will address some of these issues that people have been concerned about. And I think the directors will be able to hopefully nod their head and let you know that they're comfortable with this. Now, whether we do it over 1, 2, or 3 years, that's a decision that really comes from you all, because it is a decision that comes with a funding question. And because it is ongoing funding, that is not something that is easy to do.
Thank
Just
you,
leave
Mary.
it at that, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to suggest closed session and
Yes.
quick bite to eat before public hearings.
Read us out.
This will be a resolution to adjourn into closed meeting. Whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose or the disposition of publicly held real property where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body, specifically discussion of real property in the Lees Hill District and Livingston District. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn into closed meeting for discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of an existing business or industry, where no previous announcement has been made of the businesses or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, specifically a recreational and entertainment business and storage business. And whereas the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors desires to adjourn in a closed meeting for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation, where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, specifically regarding the matters of Walgreen Company versus County of Spotsylvania, case numbers CL 13-001151 and CL 15-000723. Spotsylvania Historical Association, Inc. versus Board of Supervisors of Spotsylvania County et al., CL 15-1045, and Roger and Mary Williams et al. v. Board of Supervisors of Spotsylvania County, CL 15-1094, in consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters, specifically regarding matters of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and matters regarding zoning. And whereas pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.23711A 3, 5, and 7, such discussions may occur in closed meeting. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors does hereby authorize discussion of the aforestated matters.
So moved.
Call the question.
Five yes.
Supervisors has convened a closed meeting on this day pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.23712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Spotsylvania County Board of Supervisors hereby returns to open meeting and certifies by roll call vote that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion to convene into closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Aye.
Dr. Trammy.
Aye.
And Vice Chairs. Aye.
Open session, we're at public presentations. Amy, has anyone signed up for public presentation?
No, sir.
Anyone present who would like to speak at public presentations, not a public hearing, that has not signed up? We'll move on then. First public hearing concerns renewal of the lease for Congressman Dave Bratt's office, which is here in the Holbert building upstairs at the other end of the building. This is a renewal that will term from January 2nd, 2017 to January 1st of 2019. Lease has been reviewed by the county attorney's office, and public hearing is required for approval of the lease renewal by the Board of Supervisors. The rent is $250 a month, and the other details are as provided in your package. Any questions?
You have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, would you open the public hearing, please?
Oh, sorry. Anybody wishing to speak on this matter, please come forward.
There's nobody signed up to speak.
Let's move
Close the
forward.
public hearing, please.
Close public hearing. Sorry.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Sproul.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Call the question.
Five yes, with Mr. Ross and Mr. Skinner not present.
Next is a public hearing for amendments and additions to County Code Section 19B-23 through Section 19B-29 in Article 2, posting dwelling and building address numbers. This has been an item brought forward by our county attorney. It's here for public hearing.
Yes, and Mrs. Weimer is here to speak on this. I believe, you've been notified that this is coming down the pipe. We had the authorization for this public hearing, and I'll turn it over to her.
Public hearing tonight is to determine whether the Board of Supervisors deems it appropriate to amend Spotsylvania Code Sections 19B, which was adopted originally in 2014, pertaining to posting dwelling and building address numbers. The changes that are proposed are as follows. Sections 19B-23 through 19B-27 contain some typographical errors. There was just some misspellings and some clarifications that we felt would make the entirety of the ordinance flow better. It is suggested in 19B-28 to be amended to reflect who can be designated by the county administrator for enforcement purposes of this particular provisions of the code. The revisions in sections 19B-29 include violations as Class 4 misdemeanors in accordance with the Virginia Code, Section 15.2-1429. It's my understanding that both FREM and the Sheriff's Office support amending these sections as they assist with public welfare safety by making addresses more visible to law enforcement and to FREM personnel when they are assisting citizens. And if there are any questions or clarifications that you'd like to have, I'd be happy to answer those.
Mr. Chair, so what is the penalty?
The penalties are on a graduated scale. The first offense would be $50. The second offense would be $100. For a third or subsequent offense, it'd be $250. But that comes after a notice of violation has been issued and a citizen would be given ample opportunity to cure, even up to the point of when it goes to court. The procedures generally would be if they have cured it before they get there, the charge would be dismissed once it comes into the court system.
So the last one, so we're dictating what numbers and size and all that and how they're placed, or?
There are suggested sizes, and it's mostly for visibility from the road. They have to be, I believe it's, if you excuse me for just a second.
And Sheila, Mr. McLaughlin, those regulations are currently there. We're not establishing those. Those are currently there. That's not something that's changing with this. But yeah, I think it's currently there as to, the size and where they're to be located. So, but that's not changing. That's
So
already.
I guess the question, if you have a 2-inch letter
Yeah,
that's outside of the ordinance, you're going to be fined $50?
well, you would be given a notice of violation and an
And then you-
opportunity to correct it. If you
Right.
don't correct it, then you could be charged, yes. It's a 3-inch in height for multiple occupancy buildings and 4 inches for things that are newer buildings.
I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I did not brief myself before on this, but is there anywhere in there where we're dictating colors? Because you
No,
put
sir.
black on black,
No, sir.
you might as well not even have that thing posted anyway, because you can't see it at night.
The intention is that it be visible, and I mean, I would assume that people would understand that if you have a black house, that if you didn't put white lettering on it, it would be a bit difficult to
I
be
have learned
visible.
repeatedly in this and in many other positions, do not assume. But
That's true.
Mr. Benton, it does say in the requirement, it shall be made of a durable and clearly visible material. So I think that would be accounted for, that no black on black, that if it's a black number on a black, it would not be clearly visible. So hopefully that's been addressed.
I don't know. I don't have anything else. Anybody else? Anything else? All right, let's open a public hearing.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Anybody out there that did not sign up to speak that wish to speak now on this? All right, close public hearing. Anybody willing to make a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. This motion, the ordinance was originally crafted by myself, and these corrections I agree with, so I make a motion to approve.
Call the question.
Three yes, with Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Benton voting no.
Next is R17-0002, Brenham Mechanical LLC in the Berkeley District.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Kimberly Pomato. I'm with the Planning Department. This is a request to rezone approximately half an acre from residential 2 to commercial 1 with proffers to allow for a contractor's office and shop. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and voted unanimously to recommend approval, and staff recommends approval of ordinance RO 17-0002 with the proffered conditions dated April 5th, 2017. Here's an aerial image with the subject property outlined in red. It's located at the corner of American Legion Drive and Courthouse Road. You may recognize this property as it is the old forestry building next to the Marshall Center and immediately across Courthouse Road from Spotsylvania Middle School. The Virginia Department of Forestry occupied the property as an outpost as a permitted use from 1989 through September of 2015. The applicant, Branham Mechanical LLC, is a commercial HVAC contractor business operation. The Branhams have purchased this property and wish to operate their business at this location, which is requiring the rezoning. The property is designated on the future land use map as institutional, but it's surrounded by the mixed-use designation. The institutional designation is reflective of the former use. Therefore, staff determined it was most appropriate to evaluate this project within the mixed-use land use category, particularly given the existing surrounding development consists of commercial, residential, institutional uses. The mixed-use category, this proposal is consistent with that mixed-use designation that's envisioned for this area. This particular proposal slightly falls short of meeting all of those design goals set out in the comp plan for the mixed use. But otherwise, from a land use perspective, it's consistent. Here is the generalized development plan. Currently, the 0.4 acre site includes a 2,341 square foot building, a gravel parking area, and 3 points of access, 2 of which are located on American Legion Drive, one here and one that's not shown up towards Courthouse Road, and then of course 1 point of access on Courthouse Road. The contractor office use is expected to generate 11 vehicle trips per day. As this is a commercial HVAC business, there are no customers visiting the site, and the applicant explained that on most work days, their employees will be dispatched directly from their home to the job site. As part of this proposal, the applicant has agreed to close the access on American Legion Drive that's closest to Courthouse Road. So you see that closure right here. Also, they will be upgrading the existing access on Courthouse Road to meet the VDOT low-volume commercial entrance standards. Both of these improvements meet the county's access management goals, of course, and compliance with VDOT standards as well. With previous rezoning cases, which include completely developed sites such as this, staff has consistently recommended that the sites be brought into compliance with current county code standards. In this case, staff has recommended a landscape street buffer be installed along the frontage in addition to paving the parking area. The applicant has volunteered proffers that address both of those recommendations. There are proffers that have been provided, first being the applicant has provided proffered to develop in conformance with the generalized development plan. They have agreed to install the landscaped buffer per the county's design standards manual. The buffer will be installed 30 days from certificate of occupancy. They will be doing interior renovations to the building, and so upon 30 days upon issuance of occupancy, they'll install the buffer. Staff's supportive of this language, and the buffer will certainly enhance the streetscape along Courthouse Road. The applicant has agreed to eliminate the second point of access, as we just saw, and additionally upgrade the access on Courthouse Road. Again, staff's supportive of this language. It's consistent with the county's access management policies and VDOT standards as well. The applicant has agreed upon a change of use which results in an increased number of vehicle trips. The site shall be improved to include a paved parking lot, and the entrance on Courthouse Road would be further improved as necessary in accordance with VDOT standards. Staff is supportive of this. We thought this was a worthy compromise given the low amount of traffic that will be generated on this site, and the only downside to the language is there's no guarantee of timing, but it is certainly a worthy compromise, and staff was supportive of this language. The applicant has also agreed that all signage shall be monument style, and staff is supportive of this language as well, as it'll further assist in enhancing the streetscape there along Courthouse Road. Staff's findings in favor: the proposal is an adaptive reuse of a currently vacant building in a commercial corridor, and this will ultimately increase the tax revenue with no negative impacts expected to the adjoining properties. The Courthouse Road streetscape will be enhanced with the installation of the landscape buffer and monument-style signage, and the VDOT and county access management concerns will be addressed with the elimination of the access point on American Legion and the improvements to the existing access on Courthouse Road. Staff's findings against. The proposal falls short in meeting all of the design aspirations outlined in the mixed-use district, though I caveat that statement by saying that while the proposal doesn't necessarily further that vision of the mixed-use district, it doesn't degrade it either. With the paved parking area, proffer language as proposed, there's no guaranteed timing, as I mentioned, for the site to be completely brought up to county standards. Again, staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval with the proffered conditions, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Open public hearing.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody out there that did not sign up that wishes to speak on this matter? Close
Is there
public.
a presentation from the applicant, Kim?
The applicants aren't here. I don't think they wish to speak unless you have specific questions for them.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir, a motion to approve.
Call to question.
Five yes.
Next.
Next, Mr. Chairman, is R16-007, Graham and Bethard LLC, Safford Auto, and Fields Investment LLC, and this is in the Battlefield District.
This is a request to rezone approximately 3.3 acres from residential 1 to commercial 3 with proffers to allow for a general commercial building and a commercial off-street parking lot for new car inventory as a special use on 2.8 acres of the property via a concurrent SUP application. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and is recommending approval with the proffered conditions, and staff also recommends approval of RO 16-0007 with the proffered conditions dated May 24th, 2017. Here's an aerial image of all of the properties. These are located on the south side of Courthouse Road, east of the intersection with Hood Road. There are two applicants involved with the rezoning. The first is Fields Investments LLC, which owns these properties right here. These are located to an existing office building, and here's the Gulf gas station here. There's an existing house on this property that is currently being rented for residential use. The second applicant is Safford Auto, who owns this collection of properties. These properties total 2.8 acres and are currently vacant. All these properties are adjacent to an office, the SPCA, the ProBuild lumber yard, and a vacant 13-acre piece located here to the south, which actually has a split zoning of residential 1 and commercial 3, and it does, in fact, have frontage along Route 1. This is the generalized development plan provided for both the rezoning and the companion SUP request. You'll see that there are two proposed points of access from Courthouse Road, one here, one here. The first will serve the proposed one-story, 3,540 square foot office building. The intended use for this building is to locate Mr. Fields' Commuter Express business. The office operation will be run at this location, and the fleet of commuter vans will actually be stored on the commuter lot. On this portion of the development, there are 23 parking spaces, which will be utilized by both the proposed office building and also the adjacent office building, which is also owned by Fields Investments LLC. You'll see there's the interparcel connection, and this is going to provide that adjacent office site with a significant improvement. Currently, the only access to this existing office building is through the Gulf Station access point, and staff's understanding that their access frequently gets blocked by customers at the Gulf Station and at the taco truck that's located there. So this will be a improvement for that condition. There is also a stub that is shown here to the where the Safford parking lot will be, and also a 10-foot landscape street buffer is provided along the frontage of the office development along with a sidewalk. The second point of access is solely for the use of the Safford office for the Safford Auto parking lot. The parking lot is for the storage of new car inventory for Safford's Kia, Chrysler, Jeep and Dodge, and Fiat dealerships. The parking lot will consist of 346 parking spaces and will be completely fenced and gated with no interparcel connections to the adjacent properties, and this is to ensure the security of the site for their new inventory. The fencing visible from Courthouse Road, which is about 50 feet back, it would be this area, will be constructed of a decorative aluminum, and the remainder of the fence will be chain link. A 20-foot landscape street buffer is provided along the frontage of the parking lot along with a sidewalk. To further limit the visual impact of the parking lot from Courthouse Road, the applicant has provided evergreen plantings within the aluminum fencing and also in these landscape islands interior to the site. These evergreen plantings will run 50 feet back. The applicant has provided the required transitional screening along the rear of the property here. But they have requested a waiver to the transitional screening requirement along this adjacent property line to the SPCA and to the office building. Staff has received letters from those property owners, and they're in favor of eliminating that screening. And given their concurrence and the intensity of the development, staff's been supportive of that waiver as well. The applicant is also requesting a waiver to the interior parking lot landscaping requirement, as this would limit the amount of parking available for their vehicle storage. Staff has no concerns with that waiver either, given that they've gone the extra mile to limit that visual impact and the view sheds from the Route 1 corridor. With respect to traffic, the office development is expected to generate 68 vehicle trips per day, and the parking lot is expected to generate 35 per day. The parking lot will only be accessed by Safford Auto employees retrieving cars to and from when necessary. No delivery trucks will be here unloading inventory. All vehicle deliveries will occur at the associated dealership, and then they'll be brought over one by those employees, and then if a customer comes to the lot and wants to see it in a certain color, an employee will be sent to retrieve it and take it back to the dealership. A traffic impact analysis was completed for both projects, combined and separately. Both studies indicated that no right turn lanes were required for either entrance. In order to address the specific needs of these two developments, which was to provide each one of them their own individual access onto Courthouse Road, the applicant proposed to construct a 400-foot turn lane along the frontage, which connects a currently intermittent right turn lane on Courthouse Road. Both the county and VDOT agree that the extension of the right turn lane is a significant improvement and certainly outweighs any benefit of having a shared access in this location. The applicant has proffered a number of items for consideration. The first, to develop the site in conformance with the GDP. They have proffered to dedicate 15 feet of right-of-way along the property's frontage on Courthouse Road, which is identified on the GDP as well. The applicant's proffer an interparcel connection shall be provided to the vacant 13-acre parcel to the south upon any redevelopment of the parking lot properties. Staff is supportive of this language. The specific needs of the Safford site are such that any interparcel connections right now would jeopardize the security of that inventory. So this language gives the county that guarantee that if this is ever redeveloped, we'll have those interparcel connections that we certainly recommend for commercial developments. The applicant has also proffered to construct the 400-foot right turn lane, the continuous right turn lane along the property's frontage on Courthouse Road. Staff is in favor of this, as this is certainly a safety benefit to the community. Staff's findings in favor include that the proposal is consistent with the county's land use vision for this area, and it's an investment in a redevelopment of currently an underused portion of property along the corridor. The redevelopment will result in an increase in real property tax revenue and an increase in tax revenue of the proposed businesses. The proposal includes an enhanced evergreen buffer along the frontage, which will reduce that visual impact along Courthouse Road. And of course, as we've discussed, the construction of a 400-foot section of right turn lane, which is going to connect currently an intermittent right turn lane that exists today. The proposed interparcel connection from the proposed office site to the existing office site will address limited and problematic access that exists today for that office. Staff's findings against include that a large vehicle storage lot of 346 spaces may not be completely within character of the surrounding commercial area. Also, a vehicle storage lot is not the highest and best use for the property as it translates to tax revenue. For example, a bricks and mortar business would certainly produce more revenue on this property. Again, both the Planning Commission and staff are recommending approval with the proffered conditions, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board? Open public hearing.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody that did not sign up and would like to speak on this matter specifically? Close public hearing, or is the applicant here?
The applicant is here.
Does he want to speak?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just to be respectful of our time, since we did start late, I'm going to forego the presentation, but I am here for any questions if you have it.
I just got one. What kind of security are you going to have for your vehicles? You're not going to put in any video or anything like that? Okay, thank you. I'll close the public hearing. And anybody want to make a motion?
Yes, sir. Being in my district, I motion to approve with the amended proffers.
Call the question.
Five yes. It brings Mr. Chairman to SUP 17-0002, Anderson Propane Services, Inc. in the... Yes,
We
ma'am.
have a companion SUP
Oh.
for Safford.
I'm sorry. I did run over that.
And
Yes.
I do have a presentation, but it's identical, other than the conditions. This is the SUP just for the storage of the vehicles. The Planning Commission is recommending approval with these conditions, and staff is recommending the board adopt the resolution of approval, including the following conditions, which is that the property will be developed as an off-street parking lot in conformance with the GDP, that all the transportation improvements shall be included on the site plan for the parking lot unless they are constructed before with the office site plan, and that those improvements would be constructed within 12 months of approval of the site plan. And also that the off-street parking lot for the new vehicle storage would not be used as a sales lot.
Any comments from the board? All right, open public hearing.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody out there that did not sign up but would like to speak on this matter specifically? All right, we'll close the, is there any comments from the applicant and all this? Close the hearing.
Make a motion to approve.
Call the question.
And that's with the recommended conditions.
Yes, sir.
Five yes. Now we're at Anderson Propane, SUP 17-0002, Lee Hill District. You also, Kim?
Still me.
Still you? Very good. Keep the drive alive.
All right. This is a request for a special use approval to allow for either 4 30,000-gallon or 2 60,000-gallon above-ground propane storage tanks on 1.2 acres of commercial 2 property. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and did recommend approval with staff's recommended conditions, and staff recommends the board adopt the resolution of approval, including the conditions that were outlined in the staff report, which include that the property shall be developed in conformance with the GDP to either construct 4 30,000 gallon or 2 60,000 gallon above ground tanks, that the applicant shall complete an emergency plan to be approved by the Spotsylvania From Services Department prior to site plan approval. This will be a coordinated plan between applicant and FREM to ensure the safety of the facility and the surrounding area in the event of an incident. And thirdly, that the second point of access on the west side of the site connecting to the Deep Run Office Park will be utilized for emergency services only. Here is an aerial image of the site outlined in yellow. This is located at the end of Beulah-Salisbury Drive, just east of the intersection with Tidewater Trail. Beulah-Salisbury serves as a portion of the county-city line, so development on the north side of Beulah-Salisbury is within the city of Fredericksburg limits. The applicant has existing storage tanks that are located on that north side of Beulah-Salisbury within the city. The area has a history of propane and oil storage, and today the neighboring sites include Lincoln Terminal, which is within the city, located here, and then Quarles Petroleum here, which is located in the county. Here's the generalized development plan, which demonstrates the applicant's wish to expand the business's storage capacity by installing the above-ground storage tanks. The purpose of the additional storage is to purchase the propane in bulk during non-peak season at a lower cost and then have the capacity to store it on site. This is no plans to resell or operate a terminal facility on this site. Therefore, there's no additional traffic expected to be generated with this proposal. It's purely just for bulk storage. The GDP shows a completely fenced area with 4 30,000 gallon tanks located centrally on the site. As previously mentioned, the applicant may opt to do 2 60,000 gallon tanks. This could be dependent on a few factors, I believe cost and the availability of the tanks themselves, and the applicant may speak more to that later. I think at this point they're leaning more to the 2 60,000 gallon tanks, but they would be still located within this footprint and actually take up a little bit less area, and there would be less connections required as well. The access from Beulah-Salisbury Drive will be gated and accessed electronically by Anderson distribution trucks. A secondary access is provided here to the adjacent Deep Run Office Park. However, the secondary access is purely for emergency services only in the event that it's needed. There are, of course, safety concerns related to a pressurized gas operation. Anderson Propane Services has a safety plan in place, which is in compliance with all federal and state standards, and a copy of which was included in your board packet. The storage tanks will be constructed, operated, and maintained according to the requirements of the National Fire Protection Association. The site will be remotely monitored 24/7, including a closed-circuit surveillance system, and have limited automated gate access. FREM has reviewed this application, and they recommended the condition that an emergency plan be coordinated together and in place prior to site plan approval. Given the proximity of the subject parcel, staff did request that the city of Fredericksburg provide comment. Their singular concern revolved around the condition of the intersection of Beulah-Salisbury and Tidewater Trail. It's our understanding that these trucks have a limited turning radii, and so when they're coming in and out, they're forced to cross over into the opposing traffic lanes. The county does not have a project at this location for any intersection improvements. We did understand the concern, and we did reach out to VDOT, and VDOT has safety funds available that would expand the turning radii and address the primary concerns at this intersection. So staff is working with VDOT on that. That would be VDOT funded improvements, and staff would just be assisting in some of the necessary right-of-way that would be needed from Corals. Corals has indicated that they would be willing to dedicate that right-of-way, so we'll help facilitate that process. Findings in favor are that the proposal results in business investment in the county and complements the county's industrial and commercial growth and tax-based diversification goals. The applicant will work with Spotsylvania FREM to create an emergency plan to ensure the safety of the facility and the surrounding area in the event of an incident. And the proposal is not expected to adversely impact the road network. As I mentioned, this is just bulk storage, so any issues with the intersection won't be exacerbated with this proposal. Findings in favor, or the findings against, are just that there are safety concerns related to a pressurized gas operation with large storage tanks. But with that, FREM has reviewed this, they're on board, we'll have a safety plan, and that concludes my presentation. Again, we're recommending approval with the recommended conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board for Kim? Does the sorry, Dr. Champion?
Do we know what the nearest residence or residential building is?
The nearest residence is about 2/10 of a mile.
And what about retail space?
The Deep Run Office Park is adjacent to this site.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does the applicant have a presentation?
The applicant is here.
Does he have a presentation to give us? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mark Anderson, and I'm the president of Anderson Propane Service here in Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania County. I'm here to present and discuss our proposal to build and operate two 60,000-gallon propane tanks at 1620 Beulah Salisbury Drive here in the county. Kimberly does such a great job. I'm going to try not to be redundant, so I'm going to skip around just a little bit and to try to save a little time. But the history of this area has always been energy storage, fuel storage off of Beulah Salisbury. It's long been the energy storage hub of the greater Fredericksburg area. Back in the 70s, there was an Exxon terminal. The property is still there. Corals Petroleum is there. Anderson Propane, Anderson Oil Company are both there, as well as the Lincoln Terminal operation, which is directly adjacent to my property, which is a state-of-the-art terminal facility that's been added in the city, and it's quite a nice facility if you've ever seen it. While my corporate office is located in Spotsylvania County, my storage facility currently is located in the city. We would like to expand the two 30,000-gallon tanks we have into Spotsylvania County with two 60,000-gallon tanks. The reasons for the expansion are very simple, and Kimberly touched on it. We're a locally owned and operated company. We compete against the national companies, being AmeriGas, Ferrellgas, large regional companies like Blossman. And while we can compete service-wise, I certainly think we have a very good reputation and an open-door policy if a customer wants to come by and talk to us. It's difficult for a company our size to compete against the national companies and serve our existing local customer base without the ability to buy product when it's, for example, cheaper in the summertime, store that product and then sell it in the wintertime. If we can hedge our costs against price increases, we can protect our customer base and offer them much more competitively priced product year-round. Probably the most important part of this entire conversation, and Kimberly there again touched on that, is as propane plant operators, we take this very seriously. The first and second and even the last question we should always ask ourselves is, what about safety? Is this a safe thing to do? Most people don't think about this, nor should they have to, quite honestly. They just want to be ensured of a safe, consistent energy supply. That's our job. As plant operators, we are accustomed to large storage tanks, large trucks, hauling product, very rigorous inspections, and we do not take that for granted. It's our job to educate people and officials about how seriously we take this. we've worked with all the different local localities, fire departments, that type of thing, doing joint training exercises to kind of show them exactly what our product does. And as she mentioned, we're going to build this plant to NFPA 58 standards, which, as any fire professional can tell you, that's the latest. It's the latest version of plant of safety standards. It's very important to understand that a propane plant built today versus a propane plant built 20 years ago, they're two completely different animals. There are rigorous and redundant safety valves included in today's systems that are nitrogen activated, for example, that those valves are kept open during the process of plant operation. In the event that there is an emergency, there are mechanisms in place where that nitrogen, where that nitrogen would shut off those valves in the event of an emergency. So that we're not in the, God forbid we had a fire, it wouldn't be fed with propane. It would shut itself down. So there's a lot of remote capabilities that we have. As Kimberly mentioned, this is we're going to have remote access, gate access. One of the things that we do that we're pretty proud of, quite honestly, is we do we are able to do remote monitoring. I'm trying not to bore you with too many details, but we do remote monitoring so that in the event that we had a sudden loss of product or we had any type of anomaly, anytime there's a delivery, anytime there's a reduction in inventory because the truck's loaded, everybody, there's a group of people in my company that get a redundant text, for example, to say that 8,000 gallons of product was just added to this tank, so that in the event that something happened at 9 o'clock at night, we would know. So even though it's not just a tank sitting out in the middle of nowhere. We're monitoring this thing 24/7. So I guess in the essence of time, I probably ought to cut it short. I could keep going with this valve stuff, and I find it very fascinating, but most people don't. But anyway, I would love to answer any questions you might have. I'm not a technical expert, but I'll do what I can. So thanks for listening.
Mr. Yakubowski.
Thank you. You said your current location's in the city.
Correct.
Where at is that? I waited till you took a drink, by the way. So.
Thank you.
Yes.
Where is that? Where is that?
Yeah, your
It's
current
directly
location.
across the street, actually.
Okay. So,
1600 Beulah Salisbury Drive.
So you're just moving across the street?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions from the board? All right, open public comments.
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody that did not sign up that wishes to speak directly on this matter? We'll close public comments.
Chair.
Go ahead.
Mr. Skinner asked me in his absence if he was not here to motion for approval, so I do so.
Dr. Trampy?
Kimberly, you mentioned the nearest residence was 0.2 of a mile. Is that close enough that they would have been notified about this hearing and the Planning Commission hearing?
Yes, sir.
And
They would have been notified prior to the application being submitted. That's in accordance with our community meeting policy. A community meeting was not required, but notification letters were sent out. We only notify adjacent property owners in writing for public hearings, but the property is posted, and it's also, of course, advertised in the paper.
did anyone speak in opposition at the Planning Commission hearing?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion on the table. Move the question.
Five, yes.
And lastly, we have a public hearing to authorize me as county administrator to execute a Verizon easement deed crossing county-owned property identified as tax map 9A 37D, and Mr. Petrovich will fill you in on the details.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the board. Following the public comment period, the staff recommends that the board authorize the county administrator to execute the easement agreement with Verizon. Like Mr. Taylor said, this is across tax map 9A 37D, which is county-owned property along Orange Plank Road. Verizon is extending their fiber optic service to provide fiber optic service to those citizens in Six Lakes West subdivision on Orange Plank Road. In order to accomplish that, they're looking for an easement across the county-owned piece of property there. It's a 12,800 square foot easement. So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board? Applicant want to say anything as far as who's wanting to?
No, sir.
No. Open public comment?
Yes, we have one citizen signed up to speak, Marty Downing.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Marty Downing. I live in Six Lakes West. I'm currently the president of the Homeowners Association, and I'm here to speak representing our community. Over many years, we've been stuck with DSL. It cuts in and out constantly, and over the past 2 or 3 years I've been president, we've been working closely with Verizon and the county trying to bring FiOS into our neighborhood. We couldn't get cable companies to come in. We're in this area where we're surrounded by all the updated communications, except nobody wanted to come to us, and we are just praying that we get approval for this easement. If our children are the ones who have been paying the price, they've had a difficult time in our subdivision to do homework assignments. Every year, the requirement with the connection to the internet, doing research with our schools for homework assignments have gotten more and more burden placed on our students, and with DSL, we haven't been able to meet that. So we're hoping for the approval to bring us up to this day and age. Thank you. And I can answer any questions if you may have any.
No, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are
Anybody
no
else?
other citizens signed up to speak.
Is there anybody else out there that did not sign up but wishes to speak on this matter specifically? All right, close the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, motion to approve.
Call the question.
Five yes.
We did not get to board reports. I think that's, if we want to do that. All right.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Mr. Yakubowski?
Oh, don't usually get to go first. This is a treat. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the school board, the school system, and highlight all of the graduates from last weekend. Was able to attend 2 of the graduations on Friday, Cortland and Massaponax, and it's always an honor to be there. The small part that I'm able to play in this whole process, it's gratifying to see the graduates and all that they've been able to accomplish. I do believe that was either the first or second budget I worked on that those graduates this year were actually entering kindergarten at the time. And so it's nice to see that they were able to take advantage of all the opportunities that our school system provides and really make our community proud, and we're very proud of what they were able to accomplish. Coming up at the next board meeting, I had been told, is the strategic plan discussion. Just a couple of items I just wanted to throw out there to staff and to my fellow board members so that we are thinking about this ahead of time and not asking for questions or answers to come back. Some of the things that I think we definitely need to talk about are our future capital needs, things that are in the CIP, and then things that are outside of the CIP. For example, new fire stations, schools, library, road connections, also a landfill with Massaponics growing as it is. We do need a new convenience site on the east side of 95 and Route 1. What our growth rate is going to be, what we're thinking it is, what it could be, different scenarios for the different rates of what we're going to be looking at when it comes to capital, especially when it comes to salaries, as we saw tonight and we've been talking about. Another question that I do have, a specific question, is how many total units, residential units, do we already have on the books in the county? And then how many have been approved for rezoning over the past 5 to 10 years? Knowing that the housing market is picking up and taking off again, knowing that some apartment buildings have been opening and also are in the works, we know that those are going to be adding to our community with all of the services that we provide as a government. The other, in the last item I'll leave my fellow board members with is, as we're doing all of this, is how can we find new avenues of revenue so that we are not constantly placing the burden on our citizens. You know, the last place that, and granted it's the largest pot of money that is out there, is the real estate tax rate. But if we're able to generate tourism, if we're able to generate those folks that can come here and spend money, enjoy our county, and then leave, and the services we provide them are minimal, that is a benefit to our county. We have that with the soccer tournament that's coming up at the end of the month. We're going to have an awful lot of people coming for that this year and next year, and that's going to be a real benefit to the county. So those types of things of how can we generate those tax dollars without the services, then that way we can keep our tax rate low on our citizens. Thank you.
Mr. Sabula?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I, too, attended some graduations, Massaponics, Cortland, Spotsylvania High, and the one thing that impressed me at these graduations was the grade point averages of the students, 4.0 and above, and it was just shocking to see that many students with that high grade point average graduating from our schools. It had nothing to do with our schools. It just shocked me because I don't remember things being that good back in the day. But, and also Spotsylvania High School, their graduation was the 76th graduating class from Spotsylvania High School. I think that is something that this county should really be proud of, to have a school with such a long and continuing student body. I do want to say that, again, thanking VDOT. People always holler at VDOT, but I work very closely with them on the condition of our roads throughout the Berkeley district, and I'm just pleased with how I call and they fix them. And the latest one was Blades Corner Road. They went and patched holes all over the place. It's just amazing to me to see the quick response, and by quick, I'm talking about almost the same day. So my kudos to VDOT on their support of our roads in this county. And speaking of roads, a section of Massaponics Church Road, Route 608, between Hickory Hill Drive and Overview Drive will be closed to all traffic from July the 6th to August the 29th, and that's for a long-term repair to that road that was long overdue. We're doing it in the middle of the summer so it doesn't affect school buses and so forth. The major communities affected here are going to be Lancaster Gate and Timberlake. And if people in these communities have questions, please feel free to address them to me. I'll do what I can to get them answered. If you'd like to have a community HOA meeting to do that, I would certainly appreciate having that for you. So again, Route 608 between Hickory Hill Drive and Overview Drive between Thursday, July the 6th and August the 29th. They'll be closed, commonly known as Massaponax Church Road. Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Nothing to report.
Dr. Tramby?
No report.
Vice Chair just has, for those calls that I've been getting about Comcast and the expansion, that's supposed to resume by the end of June here. So you should see some activity by the end of this month. Thanks. Motion to,
No, Mr. Benton, I had on the county administrator's report, I had one item that Ed was going to address. Actually, it was your request, I believe, on the prices for median mowing. Recall? The question was about, particularly on certain gateway sections of right-of-way. We have medians that only get our program for mowing by VDOT occasionally, and we had gotten some cost data to mow those monthly.
Dale, I didn't bring that information downstairs with me.
So that's why you were looking at me that way.
I was.
do we want to move that to next?
I guess we'll take that up. How high can the grass grow in 2 weeks? Because that's the issue. We have gotten a price. The mowing season is basically 6 months, and we've gotten a price. And I think for the two sections, were one on Route 3 and one on 208.
Was Route 3 and 208.
Route 3 and 208, and the all-in for 6 months was on the order of $18,000 or $20,000, as I recall. You have considerably additional detail upstairs. We'll bring that next meeting. I think what we haven't done is waylay Mary about finding that money. We don't have
That's what I was working on. That's
a pot to
why-
take it out of. All right.
Exactly.
All right.
That's
Well,
what I was working on.
we'll solve the riddle and have that back on the 27th and hopefully be situated to mow those sections.
Mr. Vice Chairman, if I may, if staff can email that out to us and put it on the agenda, and so
Yes.
just if we want to move, we can move on it.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, absolutely.
Thank you.
That we'll
And this
have
was
the
brought up,
detail
the reason I brought it up because it was brought up last year. I know we discussed it, and we had the gentleman, Mr. Baxter, that did a presentation or provided us stuff. So, anyway,
Motion to adjourn?
thank you. Call the question.